Welcome to Serenity and Fire, the podcast where wellness meets grit. I'm your host, Krista, founder of Panacea Luxury Spa Boutique. Join me as we dive into the intriguing world of biohacking, clean living, cutting-edge spa trends, and the hustle, grind, and grit of entrepreneurship. From my personal battles with weight management, infertility, and a 30-year journey to create and launch my dream business, to building a sanctuary for those who have been touched by cancer, I'm here to share real talk, inspire big dreams, and spark a passion for holistic living inside each and every one of you. So let's dive in. Welcome back to Serenity and Fire. In my recent episodes, I dove deep into everything there is to know about sugar. We spent time unpacking why fat loss feels so stubborn and how insulin, sweetness, and frequent eating can quietly block our body's ability to access stored fuel, even when we feel like we're doing all of the right things. Today, we're going to talk about ketosis, what it actually is, what it's not, and why it can feel incredibly calming and stabilizing for some people, and yet surprisingly challenging for others. And then I'm going to share my own personal fasting experience, not as a recommendation, not as a prescription, and definitely not as something that everyone should do, but as information only. What surprised me, what felt hard, what my body taught me about glucose, insulin, and metabolic switching. My hope is that as you listen, you don't compare your body to mine, but instead you start listening to your own body with a little more consistency, curiosity, and compassion. Because metabolic healing isn't about copying someone else's protocol. It's about understanding your physiology and finding what works for you. So let's talk about ketosis, and then I'll walk you through what my body revealed when I finally gave it the space to switch fuels. What actually is ketosis and what isn't it? Well, first, ketosis is not a diet. It's simply a low insulin metabolic state where your body finally has access to stored fat and begins producing ketones as alternative fuel. It's a signal from your body that insulin's low, glucose demand is reduced, and fat stores are finally accessible. The good news is that you don't need to live in ketosis forever, but accessing it, even briefly, can be incredibly informative and healing for your body. Ketosis often feels calmer, it's clearer, more stable. And once people hear about ketosis, the next question they typically ask is almost always, so does that mean I need to fast? So let's talk about that. What really is fasting? And what is the difference between fasting and starvation? Because let's be frank, who wants to starve themselves to death? And fasting can sound pretty scary, especially if it's something that you've never done. It can sound extreme, and it can definitely sound like starvation. But fasting and starvation are not the same thing. Starvation actually happens when energy is low and fat stores are inaccessible. This is usually because insulin is high. That's when the body cannot access stored fuel, so it breaks down muscle and stress hormones begin to dominate. Fasting, though, is when insulin is low, and that's very different. When this happens, your fat stores are accessible. Ketones can fuel the brain, muscle is largely preserved, inflammation often decreases, and cellular repair pathways are activated. So both of these stem from the same behavior, not eating, but they have completely different physiological outcomes. And here's what fasting actually does in the body. First, fat oxidation occurs. This is when stored fat becomes available for fuel. Second, ketone production begins. This is when the liver converts fat into ketones to fuel the brain and your muscles. Third, autophagy occurs. This is when our cells clean up damaged proteins and organelles in the body. Think of it like cellular housekeeping. Fourth, your insulin sensitivity is restored, which means the pancreas gets a break and our cells relearn how to listen. And finally, your appetite hormones are recalibrated so that ghrelin and leptin begin to normalize. So fasting isn't about deprivation. It's about creating enough space for insulin to fall so the body can access the fuel it already has and begin to heal in all of those other incredible ways. But unfortunately, fasting isn't for everyone. People who should be cautious or avoid long fasts include those with an eating disorder history, those with severe adrenal dysfunction, pregnant or breastfeeding women, some perimenopausal women under high stress, people with very low body fat, and people with uncontrolled thyroid disease. That said, how often fasting should occur and how long your fast should really last depends on who you talk to. But I do feel like there's a pretty good consensus among all of the experts that at 12 hours overnight, you're already fasting. So if you have your last meal at like, let's say 6 or 7 o'clock, and you don't wake up until 6 or 7 o'clock, then you've already fasted for 12 hours, which is pretty cool. You don't even really have to think about it. They also agree that at about 14 to 16 hours, this is when you can really start to experience a gentle metabolic reset. So that gentle insulin reduction. And then when you get to 18 to 20 hours, this is really where therapeutic insulin lowering occurs. And then when you look at a 24-hour fast, this can be really therapeutic for some because this is when you experience deeper metabolic and cellular healing effects. And then when we get into multi-day fasts, like 2 to 5 day fasts, this is when you experience more advanced therapeutic benefits. This is when you hit those states of deeper ketosis and autophagy, but it's not something you want or need to do all of the time. And these kinds of fasts honestly are not for everyone. The key point with fasting is that consistency beats intensity. And the big picture is this: sugar equals frequent glucose in the body, which leads to insulin spikes. Fasting equals insulin reduction and metabolic access and healing. So fasting is not a punishment. It's a way to remind the body that it can function without that constant glucose input. And that is metabolic freedom, which brings me to my own personal fasting experience. If you recall, in one of the previous episodes, I mentioned that I recently did a 4-day fast. I didn't do it to be extreme, and I didn't do it to really prove anything to anyone. I did it because I wanted to start listening to my body and really try to understand where my metabolism actually is. As you know, I've struggled with my weight fluctuations really, honestly, my whole life. And it's gotten way worse over the past 16 years. I typically try to blame that on my husband because he likes to eat pizza like 5 days a week. But I've tried literally everything short of going on GLP-1s, and I'm just stuck. It seems like no matter what I do, whatever I try, I just cannot get this extra 40 to 50 pounds off. I'm honestly convinced that something's going on with my glucose levels. But it's crazy because every time I get my blood work, my glucose and my A1C are always in normal levels. So I've decided to do 2 things. First, I had myself tested for heavy metal toxicity. And as I suspected, my results came back and I have extremely high levels of metals in my body. Not surprising considering that I grew up in the country around tons of cornfields filled with pesticides and chemicals. We had well water, just the list goes on and on. So I'm currently going through a 12-month heavy metal detox program with a physician that I respect so much. His name's Dr. Pompa. You can look him up. He's honestly super incredible. He has a podcast. He talks about so much great information. So I definitely encourage you to take a listen to him. But he went through his own catastrophic state of health decline. And from that, he learned so many things about heavy metal toxicity. And he developed this entire program from it. For example, did you know that if you had those silver amalgam fillings in your mouth when you were a kid, I know literally every single molar in my mouth was filled with them. Those amalgams have mercury in them. But what most people don't know, even though dentists told us they were perfectly safe, is that they actually leach mercury into your body and into your brain because that actually crosses the blood-brain barrier. Every time you chomp down on them, you grind on them, whenever you would go to the dentist and get cleanings and your teeth would get scraped, if that mercury filling was getting scraped, that mercury was leaching into your body. And what Dr. Pompa talks a lot about is that even if you've had those removed and you've had them replaced with non-mercury based fillings, if the dentists are not more of like a naturopathic dentist and they know how to properly debride the bone and the tissue after they've removed the fillings, you can still have something called cavitations in your jaw, which are basically tiny pockets of infection that you can have and not even know it. And those can actually also cause other disruptions in your body, metabolic issues, cardiac issues, sinus issues, all kinds of things. And did you also know that epigenetic research shows that lead poisoning in the body can be passed down through 4 generations, and that during key life changes like childbirth and menopause, this lead can actually leach out of our bones and into our bloodstream. For example, if my great-great-grandma was exposed to lead, but no one else after her in my family was exposed to it, I could still have lead poisoning in my body. And when I go through menopause, which I'm pretty sure I'm in right now, and my bone density starts to break down, that lead can have toxic effects for me, even though no one for the past 3 generations were ever exposed to lead. So Dr. Pompa created this detox program to combat things like this. And I'm literally obsessed with it. But it requires a lot, both financially and also from a lifestyle perspective. So I'm testing it out for all of you. I plan to report back my outcomes as I get further into the program. And right now I'm about 4 to 4.5 months into the program. So stay tuned for more on that. But the second thing I wanted to try in this discovery of what's going on with my metabolism and glucose and insulin and all the things, I wanted to try fasting. Dr. Pompa's a huge proponent of this, and I keep telling myself something else is going on in my body. I personally think it's an insulin glucose problem, despite what all of my blood work has been showing. So I finally worked up the courage to do a 4-day fast, and here's what I learned and also what surprised me. First, I did something I didn't think I could ever do. I mean, honestly, who really thinks about basically starving themselves and not eating for 4 days? Not too many people. So that was definitely not on my list of things that I thought I would ever try. So check that one off the list. Second, at first, I was only going to do a 3-day fast, but then I decided to go for a 4-day fast, and here's why. So a 3-day fast offers significant benefits like autophagy and immune resetting, but a 4-day fast extends those effects, potentially increasing fat burning and deeper metabolic changes. On the flip side, 4 days can also carry higher risks, requiring careful monitoring and potentially more lean muscle mass loss. But I felt like it was worth seeing how my body would respond if it meant I could push further into that deeper fat metabolism. I also decided that if my body didn't respond well to the 4 days, and that any potential lean muscle loss did occur, it wouldn't be that dramatic because it was just one fast. And that if all of that did happen, then the next time I do it, if I ever do, I would modify accordingly. And honestly, at that point, what was one more day? If I was doing 3, what was one more day? So I went ahead and did the 4-day fast. And then the next thing I learned was that doing this 4-day fast was a lot easier than I ever thought it would be. I think that might be because I was already doing a 24-hour fast on a weekly basis. So I feel like my body and my mind were a little more primed and prepared for this versus if I just tried to dive right into that 4-day fast cold without ever having done a fast before. Plus, I'm someone who will never quit once I set my mind to something. So I was mentally and emotionally determined to complete this fast. Okay, then what I learned was that in the fast, the first couple of days were honestly the easiest for me, and the last 2 are the hardest. That's not usually the case from what I hear from most people, because according to those stories, most people typically really struggle in the first 2 to 3 days, but by the 4th, they typically no longer feel that they're hungry. But for me, that was not the same. On day 1, it really honestly was not bad at all. I definitely felt like, hey, this is awesome. I can totally do 4 days, no problem. I slept great. I had normal bowel movements. I felt super sharp and energized all day. And then I got to day 2. The latter part of the day was definitely much harder. I felt really good in the morning, but definitely more sluggish around 5 to 6 p.m., which I started my fast at 3 p.m. on a Sunday. So this would have been about 5 to 6 p.m. on Tuesday. So I was honestly really already pushing into my 3rd day of the fast. Around about that like 4 to 8 p.m. time frame, I was definitely much more hungry. But that did calm down after overcoming my frustration with Jason ordering feta fries and eating them right in front of me. I'm still kind of bitter about that. But once I snuggled into my grape soda water and my plain hot tea that evening, everything was fine and I was all good. I didn't sleep as well that night though, and this is honestly too much information for you, but since we're talking about this and if you think you might want to try this, I want you to kind of know what I went through, so if it happens to you, it's not a surprise. But I started to have loose stool and diarrhea, and on my 3rd day, which would have been like starting at 3 p.m. on Tuesday and going to like 3 p.m. on Wednesday, it was definitely a little easier, but around 5 p.m. on that Wednesday, which would technically have been the start of my 4th day, I was so freaking hungry and I was starting to get a headache from it. I'd been having that liquid stool all day, but it started to turn black and green, which kind of freaked me out a little bit. But I later found out from my health coach that that actually wasn't a bad thing. And it can happen when your fast gets really deep into the body. So it was actually a good thing. That loose stool was pretty controlled all day until about like 7 or 8 o'clock. And then from then until probably about 11 p.m., I would have called it uncontrolled. I was literally in the bathroom nonstop, which is so gross. But at that point, I was about 5 to 7 hours into my 4th day of the fast. And since that was happening, it was kind of a signal to me that maybe I wasn't getting enough hydration. I was also starting to feel a little bit of brain fog, but I wouldn't say like a ton more than usual. And I was super excited to be in the 4th day. So by the time I went to bed, the uncontrolled diarrhea had stopped and I didn't have to think about it because I was in bed. So at the end of the 4th day though, that was probably the roughest for me. I had started having cold sweats and the shakes, and that kind of started like around 10 or 11 a.m. on that Thursday. So that would have been about 18 hours into the 4th day. I also did a hyperbaric oxygen therapy treatment and an LED treatment that morning. I did it thinking that it would be supportive of the detox and everything that was going on. But in hindsight, I think that might have just been a little too much for my body and probably did enhance those side effects a little bit more. I still had green liquid stool all day, but by the 97th hour, which was pushing into really a 5th day of the fast, I was so ready to eat. And I only went to 97 hours because I was at work and I didn't have the right foods there to break the fast. So as soon as I got home, I heated up a cup of chicken broth. One thing I've learned going through this fasting process is that breaking the fast is as important as doing the fast itself. Putting the right foods in after that fast are really, really important. So the next morning, which would have been about 15 hours into the 5th day, I still felt a little bit off that morning appetite-wise, but by dinner I was totally back to normal. And by Saturday, which would have been basically like 15 hours into the 6th day, I was completely back to normal and finally having solid bowel movements again. My coach said that quick turnaround after the fast was a really good sign that my body responded well to the fast and that I was experiencing some real benefit. The thing about the food cravings that I learned is that that's not happening because you're starving your body in the literal sense. Your body can actually survive for weeks without food. So I wasn't starving, but it felt like I was at times because my body was clearly used to those frequent glucose doses. So yes, there was resistance, there were cravings, and there was mental noise throughout the fast. But like I said, I had my mindset to it and, I just had to like quickly get over those things. And all of this told me something really important, and that is that metabolic switching takes time when insulin has been elevated for a long time. It isn't failure, it's valuable information. Fasting doesn't reveal weakness, it reveals where your physiology is currently operating. And I also learned that I definitely cannot fast for more than 4 days. And that 4th day was probably a little too much for me. So in the future, when I do this again, and I'm definitely going to do it again, I'm probably only going to do the 3 days instead of the 4. I can get my body into autophagy and start experiencing all of the metabolic benefits. And I think that 3 days is a good place for me. The last thing I learned is that I don't think the benefits of this fast were something that I realized right away. I think for me, the benefits of this fast, which at this point I did probably about 6 weeks ago, are something that I'm just now finally realizing. For example, through the holidays, my husband and I always go to our place in Florida. We stay down there for 3 weeks. We work from there. We have our company manager strategy planning meeting. A lot goes on when we're down there, but we also see our friends and we go through all the holiday festivities and, you're out of town and you're out of your routine. And so 3 weeks is a long time. It's easy to get out of your normal habits and your good eating habits. And typically when I am gone, when I come back, it's easy for me to easily put on like 5 to 10 or 12 pounds. This time I had no weight gain, which was such an awesome accomplishment. And I really do attribute that to the fast that I went through, but also the way my body was responding and flexing metabolically afterwards because of the fast. I continue to do a 24-hour fast once a week. And I think that going in and out of those fasts are definitely creating that desired metabolic flexibility. And that's why I think I didn't gain that weight. And I think that's the other thing is that staying consistent, even though it was the holidays and we were out of town, keeping that once a week, 24-hour fast in my diet compounded the benefits of the 4-day fast. And that consistency of doing that and then also doing intermittent fasting is definitely something that is telling me that my body is craving and needing that metabolic flexibility. So it's kind of cool to like be able to actually hear and listen to your body and see and feel differences occurring. I guess at the end of the day, what I really learned is that there's definitely a glucose issue going on in my body, and I'm determined to figure out what it is. So here's what I want you to hear clearly in this episode. If fasting feels hard, if ketosis doesn't come easily, if cravings don't disappear overnight, it doesn't mean that you're broken. It just means that your body's adapting. It means that your physiology is recalibrating, and all of that takes consistency, not extremes. Ketosis is a tool, fasting is super informative, and metabolic flexibility is the goal. And you can absolutely get there gently, intelligently, and sustainably, but it all has to be done with consistency. So that's a wrap for today's show. If this episode resonated with you, share with someone you love, because I know that when I learned all of this information, it helped me tremendously. As always, please remember that everything shared on Serenity and Fire is meant for general information and inspiration purposes only. The topics we discuss are not intended to diagnose, treat, or replace personalized medical care, so please always consult with your healthcare provider before trying anything we talk about on the show. Your health is unique, and your care should be too. You can support the show by following us, leaving a review, and connecting with me on social at Serenity and Fire. Until next time, keep balancing Serenity with Fire. I'm Krista Guigeni, and I'll talk with you in our next episode. At Panacea Luxury Spa Boutique, we don't just offer traditional spa treatments. We create rituals that relax your mind, restore your health, and rejuvenate your spirit. From biohacking technologies to advanced oncology-trained care, everything we do is designed to help you heal on the deepest level with clean, holistic therapies, products, and amenities that are second to none. And right now, you can experience two of my favorites, our whole body LED light bed or hyperbaric oxygen therapies. And as a thank you for listening, you'll get 10% off your first session when you use the code Serenity10 at booking. What is your panacea? Let us help you find it, because true wellness isn't a quick fix, it's a ritual.